Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something that might just change the way you see everyone around you. From the person you love, to the person you admire, to the person staring back at you in the mirror. If you really want to see someone's true character, pay attention to just two things: how they treat others when they are in power, and how they respond when they are in pain. Because those two moments, those two windows, will show you more than years of conversation or decades of smiles ever could. Stay with me, because by the time we're done, you're not just going to understand people better. You're going to understand yourself deeper. Ladies and gentlemen, if you truly want to understand the nature of someone's character, don't watch them in their moments of weakness. Observe them in their moments of strength. It is not adversity alone that unmasks a person. Power is just as revealing, and sometimes even more so. You see, there is a certain grace that exists when someone is struggling, because when you're low, humility often follows you like a shadow. You're forced to rely on others. You learn to listen. You walk carefully because your survival depends on it. But when someone is elevated, when they step into influence, position, or leadership, when the crowd starts to cheer and the world begins to bow, that's when the real test begins. Because power doesn't always corrupt. Sometimes, it just reveals what was hiding all along. There's a story about a young man who grew up in a poor village. Humble beginnings. He helped his mother with chores, always said, "Thank you," to the elders, and was known for his gentle demeanor. One day, through education and discipline, he rose to a high political position. People praised him. They said, he remembers where he came from. But months passed, and something shifted. He stopped greeting the janitors. He overlooked the beggar who used to share food with him. He interrupted elders in meetings. Power hadn't changed him. It had unmasked him. You must understand, the way a person behaves when they have the upper hand, when they no longer need to be kind, when they are not dependent on anyone else's approval. That's when you see the truth of their spirit. Because respect born out of necessity is not the same as respect born out of discipline. True respect, true humility, exists regardless of position. Consider for a moment how a manager treats their team. A good leader is not the one who barks orders and gets results through fear. A true leader is the one who, even when they have the authority to command, chooses to guide. The one who notices the person who's been quiet all week. The one who gives credit in public and takes responsibility in private. Power does not inflate the ego of such a leader. It deepens their commitment to serve. And this is not just about the workplace. It shows up in families too. How does a parent, who is physically stronger and emotionally dominant, treat their child? Do they speak with tenderness, or do they govern with intimidation? It shows up in relationships. How does one partner, who earns more or holds more societal clout, treat the other when decisions are being made? Do they consider, or do they control? The great philosopher Plato once said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power. Not how much he gains, not how loud he speaks, but what he does with that authority." Because power, like water, takes the shape of the vessel it's poured into. And if the heart is cracked, the power will leak out as arrogance, cruelty, or indifference. There's a story from ancient China about a general who was given command over a large territory. His predecessor had ruled with an iron fist, and fear hung over the region like fog. The general, however, decided to lead differently. He went to every town square, listened to the complaints of the people, shared meals with the poor, and visited families who had lost loved ones in war. When someone asked him, "Why are you so humble when you have so much authority?" he responded, "Because those who carry weapons must also carry compassion. Power without empathy is tyranny." Ask yourself, who do you become when you are elevated? When you have the right to choose, the freedom to act, the status to demand, what do you do with it? And perhaps more importantly, observe this in others. When someone receives success, how do they treat those who aren't in the spotlight? Do they still remember the names of the people who helped them? Do they still open the door for others? Or do they wait for someone to open it for them? There's something deeply spiritual about watching someone who has every right to boast, choose instead to bless. Someone who can command silence, but instead chooses to listen. That's not weakness, that's mastery. In the monastery, the elders often say, The loudest gong is the one that is hollow inside. It may produce a sound, but it carries no depth. In the same way, people who let power swell their ego reveal that they have not yet cultivated inner stillness. True character does not yell for attention. It speaks softly, because it does not need to be heard to feel important. Now, let us transition, not in thought but in depth, to the second revelation of character: pain. Where power reveals what's within you when the world is at your feet, pain reveals what's within you when the world is falling apart. Pain is a sacred teacher. It doesn't knock politely, it breaks the door. It doesn't whisper, it howls. And in those moments, when you're hurting, disoriented, maybe even ashamed, you are forced to confront parts of yourself you might have buried. But here's the truth: what you do with that pain is what defines you. Some people, when they are in pain, become cruel. They lash out. They carry their wounds like weapons, striking others because they haven't found the strength to sit with their suffering. They confuse volume with healing, noise with transformation. They become what hurt them, hoping somehow that vengeance will feel like justice. But vengeance is not healing. It is a performance of power in the absence of peace. There's a powerful image from nature, the Japanese art of kintsugi. When a bowl breaks, instead of discarding it, the artisans repair it with gold. The cracks are not hidden, they are highlighted. The bowl becomes more valuable not because it was never broken, but because it was broken and restored with intention. So it is with the human soul. You can meet someone who's been betrayed, but instead of building walls, they built wisdom. You can meet someone who's lost everything, but instead of drowning in bitterness, they chose to deepen their empathy. These people didn't let pain define them. They let it refine them. Think of a mother who's lost her child and still finds a way to comfort other grieving mothers. Think of a man who's been wrongly imprisoned, but instead of becoming hardened, uses his experience to reform the justice system. These are not just good people. These are transformed people. They've done the hardest thing imaginable. They've made meaning out of their suffering. There's a quote from Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. That is the invitation of pain. Not to fight the fire with fire, but to walk through the flame and come out forged. In the temple, when students face physical exhaustion, mental fatigue, and emotional breakdowns, they are taught to sit, just sit, not run, not distract, not deny, because only in stillness can you hear the wisdom of pain. Only in stillness can you choose your response. One student, after failing his martial arts test for the third time, stormed out of the courtyard. He refused to speak. Days passed. Finally, he returned and asked the master, "Why must pain be part of our path?" The master replied, "Because without it, your ego would be your only teacher." Pain humbles. It forces us to examine ourselves. Not to ask, "Why me?" but "What now?" Not, "What did I lose?" but "What can I learn?" The shift is subtle, but powerful. It changes you from victim to vessel, from one who suffers to one who transforms. And let us be clear, not all pain is noble. Some of it is inflicted by unjust systems, by betrayal, by evil. But even then, your response is your canvas. You cannot always choose the suffering, but you can always choose the meaning. And when you meet someone who is going through pain, listen not just to what they say, but watch how they live. Do they isolate or reach out? Do they seek understanding or spread their suffering? You'll notice, people who are aware of their pain tend to carry themselves with a quiet dignity. Not silence, but dignity. Because they have faced the shadow within themselves and emerged with light. They don't need to prove their strength. They've lived through the fire. On the other hand, people who avoid their pain often try to control others. They raise their voices not because they are powerful, but because they are afraid. They demand control, not because they are strong, but because they feel powerless inside. This is why pain reveals character, not in the hurt itself, but in how the hurt is handled. And so, between these two, power and pain, we are given two mirrors. One to see how we hold others when we rise, and the other to see how we hold ourselves when we fall. If someone passes the test of power, but fails the test of pain, their character is incomplete. If someone survives pain but abuses power, their transformation is corrupted. Both must be held. Both must be watched. And you, dear listener, are being invited to look at both, not just in others, but in yourself. What do you do when people are watching? And what do you do when they are not? Who do you become when you are praised? Who do you become when you are broken?